had a fair amount of creative training as a child, and my parents always took us to museums in San Francisco, and they're really good museums. The Palace of the Legion of Honor, the De Young Museum with the whole huge Asian collection. I love Chinese art, Japanese art. It was a good childhood, a lot of things to learn, and I never found it tiresome to go to a museum. It was always interesting. And not only did we go to museums, but we also camped a lot with my parents. So we were out in nature. We'd go up to the Sierras. We'd go to Big Sur camping with my parents. They liked to go out into the wilds. And my parents gave me a little weaving set also when I was young. So I was weaving, and I think by the time I was 8 years old. And it always was important to me to work with textiles. When I went to arts and crafts, it was important really to learn all the techniques of weaving. But not only weaving, it was a fiber arts department. So I also was doing self-screening on cloth, knotless netting, all kinds of knotting. I learned about dyeing fibers and what you needed to do with which fiber to get it to work right. It's all very handy later when I went into paper making because I had a whole wealth on fiber knowledge. When I met Peter, things kind of came together because of Trude Gormont-Pré, the head of the textile department. She had been married to a Dutchman. She had actually come from Germany. She had fled to the Netherlands as a Jew before the war and was underground during the war. She had already married the Dutchman, and he had been arrested by the Germans during the war because he was in the resistance. And right before the end of the war, he was killed by the Germans. So after that, she immigrated to America because her parents had already gone there and her sister. And ended up eventually at California College of Arts and Crafts. And she was a wonderful weaver. I think probably the best weaver of her time. And to be able to have an inspiring woman like this as your teacher, it meant so much to me. And the fact that she paid special attention to us because Peter was from the Netherlands and she found out that I had a Dutch boyfriend. I think she identified with me a bit too. So I felt kind of like her adopted daughter in some ways, artistically. San Francisco was always like the place that everybody went to that didn't fit in anywhere else, and then you got to the West Coast in San Francisco and there was nowhere else to go, so that's where you stayed. So it was a group of people that were thinking really novel thoughts. It's a very creative area. This is a transitional piece from the weaving to paper making. I decided in the beginning not to do exactly what Peter was doing. I thought I would try the traditional way of paper making using a vat and a screen. So I set that up in the studio and made the piece of paper first and then pushed threads into it sometimes. And then over the threads I would take a small screen and coutts, that means put pulp on it and then turn it over and put it down and it sticks to the underlayer of pulp. And that would hold the threads down onto the first sheet, the bottom sheet. Here's one more example of the first technique with just paper and pushing threads into it. With the transition from weaving to paper, I was trying it also with Peter's technique. So this piece is done on one of the vacuum screens that Peter had made, but it actually has a whole weaving pressed into it. And it worked actually really well because I was using paper from Afghanistan, very beautiful thin paper, and it adhered really well in the modern paper pulp. I made a lot of these pieces using experiments with weaving and seeing how it would work with paper pulp. And I liked the results of a lot of them. It was really hard to decide what direction to go in. There were so many possibilities, it was just mind-boggling. Gradually, I started thinking, I don't really need the threads at all. I would make a fancy sheet of paper and then cut that up, and just as I had done with the threads, I was putting the paper into the second sheet of paper. You can see that there's a whole sheet of paper behind it and a marbled piece of paper that I'd cut and laid into it, and it adhered fine. I did whole series like this. The pieces with paper and threads were mostly from the early 70s, and when I started using more sheets of paper and redoing paper that I made first and then mixing them with the paper, the new piece of paper that was going to be on the screen, that was more the later 70s. And by the beginning of the 80s, I was starting to make almost like a cookie cutter shape and pouring pulp into the cookie cutter shape. That meant I was starting with a sheet on the back, making a sheet first, and then putting cookie cutters down and pouring pulp into it and building up my design that way. That was from the bottom up. But this is a transitional piece. At a certain point, I decided to not pour a piece of paper first, but start with just a plain screen and put the cookie cutters down and pour the pulp in them, and then keep pouring other pulp and moving it with a knife to shape forms in it. And really, I couldn't believe how good it looked. With simple things like a shell that was just more or less black and white, you could get so much variation just in white and gray to black tones or dark tones. It was another eye-opener. It seems like the paper trail that I was following was one new thing after the other. It was really wonderful. This is a start of the pulp painting. This is another transitional piece. I did start with the pulp down, and it snowed fairly often in the Netherlands in those years. So snow, and then I'd put color behind it. First, sometimes making space for the colors to come through with a knife, and sometimes after the piece had been sucked on the vacuum table, then doing it, pushing it away with a knife to make more of a relief. So you're getting a far away and a close-up effect. But this was done upside down on the vacuum table and then surface action on it. By the early 90s, I was developing really realistic techniques that I could use in this upside down and backwards pulp painting technique. By layering pulps on a vacuum table, you build up your illustration, or whatever you want to call it, from fibers. If you in-zoom here, you can see fibers. It's almost like in money, the way paper money is, with all kinds of fibers floating in it. The technique was fascinating. I was starting on a piece of Pellon, a synthetic fiber base that the pulp wouldn't stick to as it was drying. And gradually, I would start at the front of my illustration and add pulp, mixing the colors to build up the picture that was going to end up on the screen. It was very thin, you could just see through it. And as you added more and more pulp and mixed the colors, the whole illustration would come forward. It was a big change for me, because it seems like through my life I've been going back and forth between more design space filling, and the weaving was very design. It wasn't real illustrating. But as a child, I remember I worked designing things with all the different holidays. I would always spend weeks or maybe even months before Christmas fixing the boxes that the presents were in. And it was all design and very graphic. But at the same time, I was doing a lot of drawing. I liked to realistically draw, although it wasn't always easy. But I had these two different sides, and the whole time through my artistic career, it's been going back between design and figurative. The early pieces with the transition pieces from weaving to paper making were very designish, very simple. But the more I worked with paper, the more I began to be able to get depth into the pieces and not be interested in the design, but in the illustration. My inspiration for figurative art has always been living things, and quite often from our own garden. This piece is from my Japanese garden, which is behind our house. I spend a lot of time gardening, and the pieces grow out of that. Here's another idea from the garden. I've always loved doing snow with paper pulp. Snow and water, because paper pulp is the perfect media to use to make snow and water. It's almost like it was made for it. We grow many sunflowers, and they're gorgeous to do. It's all the same technique, upside down on the vacuum table, and I call it upside down and backwards because when I'm working, I'm using photographs, but many photographs for one piece. I don't just take a picture and reproduce it. I use a leaf from this picture. I want to be accurate. That's why I'm using these different pictures. I don't want it to look fake, I guess. I want it to be as real as possible. And my reason is I think people don't look close enough at nature. You really don't have to go that far to see so much of nature. It's right there around you. But you have to look at it and look at it a long time. And I think that's also why when you look at my work, you don't just look at it and go away, but things change as you look at it. You see more and more the more you look. And that's caused by the different layers of the pulp. It's not cut and dried, it's wavy. You've got no sharp lines. I've done a lot of crow pieces over the years and black cat pieces because we had a wonderful black cat. And he always was a model. He would walk out like, "Are you ready to take pictures of me? I want to be in a piece now." And this is a crow that we raised. He used to sit on our heads and sit on our shoulders, Crowy. And he stayed around and had kids. And they're still coming to the garden. In 1995, when we were in Japan, not only we had the symposium, but we also went to Imedata, which is on the west side of Japan. It's a paper-making village. There were about 64 hand paper-making businesses there. And we were assigned to one of the larger businesses. They made 2-meter-long pieces of paper for the cupboards in Japan. We were supposed to show them our techniques. And I was going to show them my upside-down and backwards paper technique. And I did. They had screens like for silk screen printing, big screens. And I showed them. They had some colors of pulp. And I showed them my upside-down technique. But the whole time I was showing it to them, I would start with the pulps. I did a big banana. I don't have it anymore. I left it there with him. Banana peel, because I'd eaten a banana at lunch, and I had a cherry with a cherry pit too. So I basically used the black first to kind of outline it, and then all the yellows and all the different colors. And they looked at it the whole time and they said, "You can't do that. You can't do that." Because we were foreigners, we were not supposed to know anything about paper. So they're just saying, this is not a technique. You can't, it's impossible. And at the end, of course, I always poured my pulp over the whole piece to make the paper, because the paper is always at the end, not at the beginning. It's not painting on paper, it's painting with paper. So I had the banana all done, and then I had to pour their pulp, their gampi, which is beautiful pulp, over the back of it. And they're going, "You can't do that. You know, it's really hard. You know, white people can't do that. Foreigners, no." But I did it. And they had a drying cabinet, so the next day it was already dry. And when it came out of the drying cabinet and they saw it, it was like, oh my God, it's real. But I never heard that any of them actually tried it later. It was like, it was just too strange. But there was one very old man that worked there, very, very short, you know, kind of small from years of work. And after that, he followed me around the whole time. That village had a temple for the paper goddess. And we went to visit it. And we also went to the museum and saw a painting of the paper goddess. And it was a big woman. And I thought, oh, because I'm a big woman too. So I thought, maybe he saw me and her. After Japan, I looked at the pictures I took in Japan, and I had made some really nice pictures of koi carpers in the village of Imedata with the clearest water I'd ever seen in a koi pond. And I thought they were so beautiful, I just had to try to do that too. And paper, it's not only good with snow, but it is wonderful with water. I use very, very thin white paper pulp, and I shove it with a knife to get it in the reflection lines. And it just does wonders with water. Well, I've done a lot of koi pieces. But I've done all different kinds of other subjects too. It's a lot of it's nature, but a recent series that I was working on has Chinese pottery in it too. And it's basically one dish that I really like. It's a type of dish that was popular for many years in China. And then I saw some great parrot tulips. And I thought, oh, they're just perfect together. So this is not out of the garden, but it's something that really goes to my heart. Here's another one I just wanted to show. I really like this series. I got tired of pulp painting the Chinese dish, so I did a few with actually making the dish with all the shadows of the dish in the pulp painting, and then using blue to do the figures with a paintbrush, which is a whole new ball game for me. I might start painting on paper, but I don't think I'll do it much. Just here and there a little bit, just to get some contrast in there. You know, somehow you just keep changing your technique all along. I've been changing it for more than 40 years now, so I imagine I'll keep changing. I've done some daturas too. For me, it's a moonflower. I usually have moons in the piece too. It's also one of Peter's favorite flowers. He's always making datura plants grow. Brings them in the winter, puts them out in the summer again. All different colors. It's one of our favorite plants.